I never thought I'd have to deal with a real life Karen, but life has a way of surprising you. My name's Jack, and I own a 50-acre estate just outside of town. It's been in my family for generations, passed down from my great-grandfather who built the place back in the 1920s. The property includes the main house, a guest house, stables, and acres of pristine forest and meadows. It's my own little slice of heaven, away from the hustle and bustle of city life. Now, about 5 years ago, a new housing development sprung up on some land adjacent to my property. Oakwood Estates, they called it. Cookie-cutter McMansions packed in tight, with perfectly manicured lawns and an overbearing homeowners association to keep everything just so. I didn't pay much attention to it at the time. Live and let live, I figured. As long as they stayed on their side of the property line, we'd get along just fine. Oh, how naive I was. It all started on a crisp autumn morning. I was out for my usual walk around the property, checking fences and enjoying the fall colors, when I heard a shrill voice calling out behind me. Excuse me, sir." I turned to see a woman in her late 40s power walking towards me, her blonde bob bouncing with each determined step. She was dressed in yoga pants and a fleece vest, clutching a tablet to her chest like it was the Bible itself. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep the annoyance out of my voice. I don't much care for unexpected visitors on my land. She finally reached me, slightly out of breath. "Yes, hello. I'm Karen Johnson, president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association." She thrust out her hand, which I reluctantly shook. "Jack Williams," I replied simply. "Mr. Williams, I'm glad I caught you. We need to discuss some serious violations of our community guidelines." I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, what?" Karen tapped furiously at her tablet, pulling up some kind of checklist. "Well, for starters, your lawn is completely overgrown. Our bylaws clearly state that grass must be maintained at no more than 3 inches in height. And don't even get me started on those trees. We have strict regulations about pruning and—" I held up a hand to cut her off. "Ma'am, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I'm not a part of your homeowners association." She looked at me like I'd just told her the sky was green. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course you are. All residents of Oakwood Estates are required to be members of the homeowner association." "That may be true," I said slowly, trying to keep my patience, "but I don't live in Oakwood Estates. This is my private property. It's been in my family for nearly 100 years. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Now see here, Mr. Williams, I don't appreciate being lied to. I can clearly see your house from here, and it's definitely within our community boundaries." I took a deep breath. "Ma'am, Karen, I assure you, it's not. My property predates your development by many decades. If you'll kindly leave now, I'll forget this little misunderstanding ever happened." But Karen wasn't about to give up that easily. She planted her feet and crossed her arms, tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. "I will do no such thing until we address these violations. Now, about those trees." "There are no violations," I said firmly, my patience wearing thin. "This is private property. Your homeowner association has no authority here." "We'll just see about that," Karen huffed. She pulled out her phone and started furiously tapping away. "I'm calling the police. They'll sort this out." I almost laughed. "Go right ahead. I've got nothing to hide." And so began my surreal afternoon of dealing with Oakwood Estates' most entitled resident. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of my troubles with Karen Johnson. While we waited for the police to arrive, Karen paced back and forth, muttering to herself and occasionally shooting me dirty looks. I leaned against a nearby oak tree, amused despite my annoyance. After about 20 minutes, a patrol car pulled up the long driveway. Officer Mike Hansen stepped out, a bemused look on his face when he saw me. "Afternoon, Jack," he called as he approached. "What seems to be the trouble?" Before I could answer, Karen marched up to him. "Officer, I'd like to report multiple violations of our homeowner association bylaws. This man is refusing to comply with community standards and claims he's not even a member." Mike raised an eyebrow at me. I just shrugged. "Ma'am," Mike said calmly, "I'm familiar with Mr. Williams and his property. He's correct. This land isn't part of Oakwood Estates. It's a private estate that's been here long before your development was built." Karen's face went from smug to shocked to angry in the span of about 3 seconds. That's impossible. I can see his house from my backyard." "You can see the edge of my property from your backyard," I corrected. "But there's a good quarter-mile of my land between your fence line and my house." Mike nodded. "He's right, ma'am. There's no homeowner association violation here because Mr. Williams isn't subject to your association's rules. Now, is there anything else I can help you with today?" Karen sputtered incoherently for a moment before gathering herself. Well, even if he's not officially part of our community, surely there are local ordinances about property maintenance. You can't just let the place go wild. It brings down property values for the rest of us." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing out loud. My meticulously maintained estate, which was worth easily 10 times the value of her cookie-cutter house, was somehow bringing down her property values? The mental gymnastics were impressive. Mike, to his credit, kept a straight face. "Ma'am, Mr. Williams' property is well within code for the county. There are no violations here. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. You're currently trespassing on private property." Karen's face turned an impressive shade of red. "This isn't over," she hissed at me before storming off towards the road where I assumed she had parked. Once she was out of earshot, Mike turned to me with a grin. "Sorry about that, Jack. New folks move in and sometimes they don't quite understand where their authority ends." I chuckled. "No worries, Mike. Thanks for coming out. Want a beer before you head back?" He shook his head. "Better not while on duty, but rain check for sure. Take care, Jack." As Mike drove away, I breathed a sigh of relief. Crisis averted, or so I thought. If only I had known then that this was just the opening salvo in Karen's crusade against my property. Over the next few weeks, things were blessedly quiet. I went about my business, tending to the estate and enjoying the peace and quiet. But Karen, it seemed, was not one to let things go easily. It started small at first. I'd find passive-aggressive notes tucked into my mailbox, reminding me of the community standards and urging me to be a good neighbor. I'd toss them in the recycling bin without a second thought. Then came the not-so-subtle drive-bys. I'd spot Karen's SUV creeping along the road that bordered my property, her head swiveling back and forth as she presumably looked for more violations to report. Once, I caught her actually stopped at the edge of my driveway, leaning out her window with her phone, apparently taking pictures. I decided to nip that in the bud right away. I marched down to the road, my face set in a stern expression. "Karen," I called out as I approached. "Is there a problem?" She jumped, clearly not expecting to be confronted. "Oh, Mr. Williams? I was just admiring the view." I crossed my arms. "With your phone camera, pointed directly at my property?" Karen had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, but she rallied quickly. "Well, if you must know, I was documenting the ongoing issues with your land. The Homeowner Association Board is very concerned about." "Karen," I cut her off, "we've been over this. I'm not part of your homeowner association. Your board has no authority here. Now, I'm asking you nicely to please stop harassing me and taking pictures of my property. If this continues, I'll have no choice but to involve the authorities." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Williams?" I sighed. "No, Karen. I'm setting a boundary. Please respect it." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked back towards my house. I could hear her engine rev as she sped away, no doubt fuming. I hoped that would be the end of it, but Karen, it seemed, was just getting started. A few days later, I was working in my workshop when I heard a commotion outside. I stepped out to find a group of men in uniforms walking around my front yard, taking measurements and jotting down notes. "Excuse me," I called out as I approached. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" One of the men, who seemed to be in charge, turned to me with a clipboard. "Good afternoon, sir. We're here from the county assessor's office to conduct a property evaluation." I frowned. I wasn't notified of any evaluation. "May I ask what this is about?" The man consulted his clipboard. "We received a complaint about potential code violations and unpermitted structures on this property. We're here to investigate and reassess the property value if necessary." My blood began to boil. I had a pretty good idea where this complaint had come from. "I see," I said, keeping my voice level. "And who exactly filed this complaint?" The man hesitated. "I'm afraid I can't disclose that information, sir, but I can assure you this is all standard procedure." I took a deep breath. "All right. Well, I can assure you there are no code violations or unpermitted structures on my property. Every building here has been properly permitted and inspected. But if you'd like to verify that, I'd be happy to show you the documentation." The lead inspector looked relieved. "That would be very helpful, Mr. Williams?" "Jack Williams." I led the inspectors into my office and pulled out a thick folder of permits, inspection reports, and property surveys. We spent the next hour going over everything in detail. By the end, the lead inspector was shaking his head. "Mr. Williams, I apologize for the inconvenience. It's clear that everything here is in order. Frankly, your property is one of the best maintained I've seen in years." I smiled tightly. "I appreciate that. Now, while I understand you can't tell me who filed the complaint, can you at least tell me if it came from someone in the Oakwood Estates development?" The inspector hesitated, then gave a small nod. "I can't say more than that, but yes." I thanked the inspectors for their time and saw them out. As I watched their vehicles disappear down the driveway, I felt a mix of anger and frustration. Karen was escalating things, and I knew I needed to put a stop to it before it got even more out of hand. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I drove over to the Oakwood Estates development, easily finding Karen's house, thanks to the Homeowner Association President sign proudly displayed in her front yard. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm, and rang the doorbell. Karen answered, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw me. "Mr. Williams, what are you doing here?" "Hello, Karen," I said evenly. "I think it's time we had a serious talk about boundaries and respecting private property." She bristled. "I don't know what you're talking about. If this is about the county inspectors, I was simply doing my duty as a concerned citizen to report potential violations." I held up a hand. "Karen, let's cut the act. We both know you filed that complaint out of spite because I won't submit to your homeowner association rules. I'm here to tell you, once and for all, that this needs to stop." Karen's face flushed. "How dare you come to my home and accuse me?" "I'm not finished," I said firmly. Your harassment and attempts to force me to comply with rules that don't apply to me are bordering on illegal. If you continue down this path, I will be forced to take legal action. Is that really what you want? For a moment, Karen looked uncertain, but then her eyes hardened. Are you threatening me, Mr. Williams? Because I'll have you know, the Homeowner Association has a very robust legal team, and we're not afraid to use it. I couldn't help but chuckle. Karen, your Homeowner Association lawyers have no standing here. I'm not a member, remember? But I do have my own legal counsel, and they're quite experienced in dealing with harassment and nuisance complaints. So I'll ask you one more time. Please stop harassing me and my property. We stared at each other for a long moment, neither willing to back down. Finally, Karen spoke. We'll see about that, Mr. Williams. This isn't over. And with that, she slammed the door in my face. As I walked back to my car, I had a sinking feeling that things were about to get a lot worse before they got better. Little did I know just how far Karen was willing to go in her misguided crusade. The next few weeks were relatively quiet, but I could feel the tension building. Every time I drove past the Oakwood Estates entrance, I could practically feel Karen's eyes boring into me from behind her curtains. I tried to go about my business as usual, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was plotting something. My suspicions were confirmed one Saturday morning when I woke up to the sound of voices and machinery on my property. I threw on some clothes and rushed outside to find a landscaping crew busy at work near my front gate. "Hey," I shouted as I jogged towards them. "What the hell is going on here?" The workers stopped what they were doing and looked at each other uncertainly. A man who seemed to be in charge stepped forward. "Morning, sir. We're just carrying out the landscaping plan as ordered by the Homeowner Association." My blood pressure skyrocketed. What homeowner association? I've told you people 100 times, I'm not part of your association. The foreman looked confused. I'm not sure what you mean, sir. We were given explicit instructions by Mrs. Johnson to bring this property up to community standards. She said the homeowner had finally agreed to comply. I closed my eyes and counted to 10, trying to calm myself. When I opened them, I saw Karen's SUV pulling up to my gate, a triumphant smile on her face. "Ah, Mr. Williams," she called out as she got out of her car. "I see you're admiring the improvements. Don't worry, we'll have this place looking shipshape in no time." I marched over to her, my fists clenched at my sides. "Karen, what the hell do you think you're doing? You have no right to send a crew onto my property." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I'm simply helping you comply with our community standards. You should be thanking me, really." "Thanking you?" I sputtered. "For trespassing and vandalism?" Karen's smile faltered slightly. "Now see here, Mr. Williams, I've been more than patient with you. But enough is enough. It's time for you to fall in line like everyone else in this community." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. "Karen, I'm going to say this one last time. I am not part of your community. This is private property. You and your crew are trespassing. And if you don't leave immediately, I'm calling the police." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Go ahead, call them. I have paperwork right here showing that this property is part of Oakwood Estates." She pulled out a folder from her oversized purse and waved it in my face. I snatched the folder from her hand and quickly flipped through it. My eyes widened as I realized what I was looking at. "These are forgeries," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You've doctored property records to make it look like my land is part of your development." Karen's smug smile returned. "Prove it." That was the last straw. I pulled out my phone and dialed cop. "Yes, I need to report a trespassing and attempted fraud in progress." Karen's face paled as she realized I was serious. She turned to the landscaping crew. "Pack it up, boys. We'll finish this another day." But I wasn't about to let her off that easily. "You're not going anywhere, Karen. You're going to wait right here until the police arrive." The next hour was a blur of police cars, statements, and barely contained anger. Officer Mike Hansen was back, along with a detective who specialized in property crimes. They listened to both sides of the story, examined Karen's forged documents, and took statements from the landscaping crew. In the end, Karen was led away in handcuffs, charged with criminal trespass, attempted fraud, and filing false reports. As they put her in the back of a patrol car, she was still yelling about community standards and property values. The detective turned to me after Karen was taken away. "Mr. Williams, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to file a formal complaint. This is a serious matter, and we'll need your full cooperation to build a case." I nodded, still somewhat in shock from the morning's events. "Of course, whatever you need." As the police cleared out and the landscaping crew packed up their equipment, I surveyed the damage to my property. They hadn't gotten too far, thankfully, but there was still visible disruption to my carefully maintained grounds. I sighed, realizing this was far from over. Karen's actions had crossed a line, and now I had no choice but to pursue legal action to protect myself and my property. Over the next few weeks, my life became a whirlwind of legal meetings, property surveys, and discussions with various county officials. I hired a top-notch property rights attorney, Sandra Martinez, to handle my case and pursue damages against both Karen personally and the Oakwood Estates Homeowner Association. "They're going to try to distance themselves from her actions," Sandra warned me during one of our meetings. "The Homeowner Association Board will claim they had no knowledge of what Karen was doing and that she was acting alone." I nodded, unsurprised. But surely they bear some responsibility. She was acting in her capacity as homeowner association president. Sandra smiled. Exactly. And that's what we're going to argue. At the very least, they were negligent in their oversight. But I suspect we'll find that at least some board members were aware of her actions and did nothing to stop her. As we dug deeper into the case, a disturbing pattern emerged. Karen's harassment of me wasn't an isolated incident. We uncovered multiple complaints from other homeowners in Oakwood Estates about her overbearing and often illegal attempts to enforce homeowner association rules. One family had been fined thousands of dollars for unapproved holiday decorations. Another resident faced daily harassment for parking a work van in his driveway, despite no clear rule against it. And perhaps most disturbingly, an elderly couple had been threatened with eviction for failing to maintain their lawn while the husband was undergoing chemotherapy. This goes beyond just you, Sandra told me gravely. Karen, and possibly others on the Homeowner Association Board, have been abusing their power for years. We need to put a stop to it. I agreed wholeheartedly. What had started as a personal dispute had grown into something much larger. It wasn't just about protecting my property anymore. It was about standing up for an entire community that had been bullied and manipulated by a group of power-hungry individuals. As the case progressed, we faced numerous legal challenges. The homeowner association's lawyers tried to have the case dismissed, arguing that I had no standing since I wasn't a member of their association. But Sandra was prepared. Your Honor, she argued in court, Mr. Williams may not be a member of the Oakwood Estates Homeowner Association, but he has been directly and negatively impacted by their actions. The defendants repeatedly attempted to exert authority over his property through harassment, false reports to county officials, and ultimately, trespassing and attempted fraud. These actions have caused my client significant distress and financial damage. The judge agreed, allowing the case to move forward. As we prepared for trial, more and more Oakwood Estates residents came forward with their own stories of homeowner association abuse. Many were eager to testify, finally seeing an opportunity to stand up to the tyranny they'd lived under for years. The trial itself was a media sensation. Local news outlets covered it extensively, and it even gained some national attention as an extreme example of homeowner association overreach. Karen, out on bail, appeared in court each day with a sour expression, flanked by a team of expensive lawyers. Over the course of 2 weeks, witness after witness took the stand to recount their experiences with Karen and the Homeowner Association Board. Expert witnesses testified about property law and the limits of homeowner association authority. And finally, it was my turn to tell my story. As I sat in the witness box, I locked eyes with Karen. Gone was the smug, self-assured woman who had stormed onto my property months ago. In her place was someone who finally seemed to realize the gravity of her actions. I recounted every interaction, every threat, every attempt to bully me into compliance. I spoke about the forged documents and the unauthorized landscaping crew, and I talked about the stress and anxiety her actions had caused me. Mr. Williams, my lawyer asked, why did you decide to pursue this case, even after the criminal charges were filed against Mrs. Johnson? I took a deep breath, because it wasn't just about me anymore. As I learned more about what had been happening in Oakwood Estates, I realized that someone needed to take a stand. These people are my neighbors, even if we don't live in the same development. They deserved better than to live in fear of arbitrary rules and constant harassment. When it came time for cross-examination, Karen's lawyer tried to paint me as an uncooperative neighbor who refused to maintain community standards. But their arguments fell flat in the face of the overwhelming evidence we had presented. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. They found in my favor on all counts, awarding me substantial damages for the trespass, attempted fraud, and emotional distress. But more importantly, they found the Oakwood Estates Homeowner Association Board grossly negligent in their oversight of Karen's actions. The judge's ruling was scathing. In addition to the monetary damages, he ordered a complete restructuring of the Oakwood Estates Homeowner Association. An independent auditor would be appointed to oversee the process, ensuring that new bylaws were put in place to prevent future abuses of power. As we left the courthouse, I was swarmed by reporters and well-wishers. Many of the Oakwood Estates residents who had testified came up to thank me, tears in their eyes. You've given us our neighborhood back, one elderly woman said, grasping my hand. We can finally enjoy our homes without living in constant fear. I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion as I made my way through the crowd. The legal battle had been long and draining, but seeing the impact it had on so many people made it all worthwhile. As I reached my car, I caught sight of Karen being led away by her lawyers. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw something I never expected: remorse. She gave me a small nod before being ushered into a waiting car. That evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sun set over my property, I reflected on the events of the past several months. What had started as a simple boundary dispute had turned into a crusade for justice, not just for me, but for an entire community. I realized that sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about setting an example and giving others the courage to stand up for what's right. The road hadn't been easy, but as I looked out over my peaceful estate, I knew I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. News of the verdict spread quickly, and I found myself inundated with interview requests from local and national media outlets. While I was tempted to shy away from the attention, Sandra convinced me that sharing my story could help others facing similar situations. Your case could set a precedent, she explained. It shows that homeowner associations aren't all powerful, and that homeowners have rights. That's a message worth spreading. So I agreed to a few carefully selected interviews, always emphasizing that the real heroes were the Oakwood Estates residents who had the courage to come forward and testify. Meanwhile, the changes in Oakwood Estates were swift and dramatic. The court-appointed auditor wasted no time in dismantling the old power structure. Karen and the entire homeowner association board were removed from their positions, and a call went out for new volunteers to form an interim board. To everyone's surprise, many of the residents who had testified in the trial stepped up to serve. People who had once lived in fear of the homeowner association were now eager to be part of its reformation. One sunny Saturday morning, about a month after the trial, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Tom, one of my neighbors from Oakwood Estates who had been particularly vocal during the trial about Karen's abuses. "Jack," he said, extending his hand, "I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced. We're having our first community meeting with the new interim board today, and well, we were hoping you might consider attending." I must have looked surprised because Tom quickly added, "Not as a member, of course. We all know you're not part of Oakwood Estates, but as a neighbor and, well, as the person who made all this possible, we'd be honored if you'd say a few words." I was touched by the gesture. "I'd be happy to, Tom. Thank you for thinking of me." That afternoon, I walked into the Oakwood Estates Community Center, feeling a bit like Daniel entering the lion's den. But instead of hostility, I was met with smiles and words of gratitude. The meeting was a far cry from the tense, rule-obsessed gatherings of Karen's reign. There was open discussion, laughter, and a palpable sense of relief in the room. When Tom introduced me and invited me to speak, I was met with a standing ovation. I cleared my throat, suddenly feeling emotional. "Thank you all for this warm welcome. I know that technically I'm not a part of your community, but over these past months, as I've gotten to know many of you and heard your stories, I've come to feel a real connection to Oakwood Estates." I paused, looking out at the sea of friendly faces. What happened here? The abuses you all suffered, they weren't just about overzealous rule enforcement. They were about power and control. But today, I see a room full of people ready to take back that power and use it responsibly. There were nods of agreement throughout the room. Moving forward, I continued, I hope we can forge a new relationship between my property and Oakwood Estates. Not one based on rules and enforcement, but on mutual respect and good neighborliness. My door is always open if you need anything, and I hope you'll extend the same courtesy to me. As I finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Several people came up to shake my hand or give me a hug. It was a surreal moment, considering how adversarial things had been just a few months ago. After the meeting, as I was preparing to leave, I overheard a conversation that warmed my heart. "You know," one resident was saying to another, "I've lived here for 5 years, and this is the first time I've actually enjoyed a community meeting. I feel like I finally know my neighbors." The other resident nodded enthusiastically. "I know what you mean. It's like we can breathe again. No more walking on eggshells, afraid of getting a violation notice for every little thing." As I drove home that evening, I felt a sense of closure. The legal battle was over, justice had been served, and a community was healing. But more than that, I felt like I had gained something unexpected, a sense of connection to the very neighbors I had once seen as adversaries. Over the next few months, the changes in Oakwood Estates were remarkable. The new homeowner association board, led by Tom and other reform-minded residents, took a drastically different approach to community management. Gone were the nitpicky rules and harsh enforcement. In their place was a focus on actual community building. They organized block parties, started a community garden, and implemented a program to help elderly or ill residents with yard work and home maintenance. The impact on property values, ironically, was positive. As word spread about the reformed, resident-friendly homeowner association, Oakwood Estates became a highly desirable neighborhood. Houses that went on the market were snapped up quickly, often above asking price. As for me, I found my relationship with my neighbors transforming. No longer viewed as the outsider who refused to comply, I was now seen as something of a local hero. Residents would wave as they drove past my property, and I was often invited to community events. I even started hosting an annual 4th of July barbecue on my grounds, inviting all the Oakwood Estates residents. It became a beloved tradition, with families spreading out picnic blankets on my expansive lawn and children playing games in the meadow. One day, about a year after the trial, I received another unexpected visitor. It was Karen. She stood awkwardly at my front gate, looking nothing like the confident, overbearing woman I had first encountered. "Mr. Williams," she said softly, I owe you an apology." I was stunned into silence, so she continued. What I did to you, to everyone in Oakwood Estates, it was inexcusable. I let power go to my head, and I lost sight of what a community should really be about. She took a deep breath. I know I can never undo the harm I caused, but I wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry. I studied her for a moment, seeing the genuine remorse in her eyes. Thank you, Karen, I said finally. That means a lot. She nodded, turning to leave, but I called out to her. Karen? The 4th of July barbecue is next week. You're welcome to come if you'd like. She looked surprised, then gave me a small, grateful smile. I'd like that, Mr. Williams. Thank you. As I watched her walk away, I marveled at how much had changed. What had started as a conflict over property lines and homeowner association rules had led to a complete transformation of a community, and even to this moment of reconciliation. I realized that sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about winning a fight. It's about creating an opportunity for positive change, for building bridges instead of walls. And as I looked out over my property, seamlessly blending into the now thriving Oakwood Estates, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The estate that had been in my family for generations was no longer just a private retreat. It had become a symbol of community resilience, a reminder that when people stand up for what's right, real change is possible. As the sun set over the rolling hills of my land, casting a golden glow on the neighboring houses of Oakwood Estates, I smiled to myself. The property line between us might still exist on paper, but in all the ways that truly mattered, we had become one community, stronger and more united than ever before. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.